Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Good day again, St Lucia, and welcome to the program, Agriculture on the Move. My name is Philip Sidney, your host. 22nd of May is International Day of Biodiversity. With me are three persons who are very resourceful to discuss this program. I will allow them to introduce themselves because I'm sure they will do a better job than I can do. So to my immediate right,
I am Shanna Emmanuel. I am a Sustainable Development and Environment Officer with the Department of Sustainable Development.
Karl Augustine, Forest Officer with the Division of Forests and Lands.
great.
Jannel Gabriel, Sustainable Development Officer responsible for biodiversity.
Jannel, I'll start with you, since you have been involved in this for a long, long time.
Yes.
Every year, we look at biodiversity, on the 22nd of May, and of course there are lots of programs. There are a number of persons maybe watching the program now, they're new, I don't think they are aware of what is biodiversity. Brief explanation, what is biodiversity?
Biodiversity is the life all around us. It's the different kinds of living things, plants, animals, microorganisms, the products that we get from them, and the ecosystems where we can find them. Okay. So our beaches, rainforests, our plants and animals, all around us right now, we are surrounded by biodiversity.
Mm-hmm. Over the years, I'm sure there are a number of programs that your unit have put together to sensitize St Lucia. Give us a little brief history of biodiversity programs in St Lucia.
Well, one of the things that the biodiversity unit or section has been trying to do is to really connect with people and to do a lot of public education. So as far back in the days when we were part of the Forestry Department, we did school visits and public sensitization. So we'd go into schools and plant trees and help students to understand that they are also part of biodiversity and they have a role in protecting it and conserving it. And then from there we explain a lot about what biodiversity does for agriculture, its role in tourism, in livelihood generation, and so on. So one of the early initiatives that we've had at public education, we also have a focus on livelihoods as far as developing livelihoods in different areas, which my forestry friends will talk about. But one of the key programs we've been developing is our National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. And back as far as 2000, we had our first plan and implemented 90% of it. And we were quite successful in bringing back the numbers of some of the species at the time which had started to decline, like your black sea urchin and so on. And so we've been working to develop biodiversity programs in various areas, including our public education, our planning and strategizing, and our policies. One of the key policies being our biodiversity bill, which is currently being revised so that we have these measures in place so we can protect our biodiversity.
Great. Forestry, I know a lot has been done in the past. Tell us some of the programs.
Forestry has, by nature, is management of biodiversity, right? Because we are dealing with living entities and the habitat. Even before there was the buzzword of biodiversity, forestry was involved in management and promoting and so on. So I can go as far back as work done by the first generation of foresters on island, where even when you look at from the fact that we had a mandate, or we have a mandate of protecting the watersheds and so on, protecting the hinterlands, right? Reforesting areas that were degraded or squatted on and so on. So even from then, forestry was critically or intricately involved in promoting, supporting biodiversity. Or I can also draw to you the 1981 Wildlife Act, which basically is one of the first pieces of legislation that speaks directly to protecting biodiversity entities, you understand? So you have wildlife species that are protected. If you look at, for example, our national bird, back then, you just had a handful of birds in the wild.
Correct.
And we can see now through our measures, our management measures, our conservation measures, our education measures, we actually have gone from having a handful of birds to having almost probably 2,000 estimated birds in our forests at the moment.
Okay.
And in fact, places where people historically probably have not seen the birds, you actually have parrot sightings and so on, right? People are hearing and interacting with the bird, right? So you find the forestry department, what we do on a daily basis involves the management, the protection of biodiversity. One of the areas that we have been focusing on more as up to current time is how do we make people make a living, earn a living from the sustainable use, sustainable management of that biodiversity. So I can draw you to things like, for example, Latania broom making. Can draw you to things like the harvesting of lassa and so on, which we have programmed, like in the case of Latania, we observed probably 20 years ago that the wild individuals, the numbers of them were actually reducing because of over-harvesting for broom making. So we intervene and we have had success on two fronts. One, in increasing the numbers of Latania palm that you have on island, as well as we have been able to sustain the broom making, the local broom making sector, so that right now you can get locally made brooms that are of high quality and so on. And there's even talk about probably expanding and exporting and so on.
And don't forget the wines too, eh?
Exactly. So we have gone beyond just making brooms with Latania to observing or recognizing its importance as you could use the fruit for wine, but also the fact that beekeepers could benefit from having Latania in the apiaries and so on. Now we're trying a similar type of approach with lassa, where we say that lassa is something that historically is tied to us as a people, and what you find happening now, we observe that the traditional means of harvesting lassa has led to the death of many other trees. So over the years, research started by my current chief actually has culminated with we developing a new method for harvesting that is a lot less taxing or destructive. And we believe we are in the means right now of saying let us spread that capacity among our private citizens so that people who may own lassa and their private lands can benefit from this new method that we have developed. So the forestry department is saying that biodiversity is very important. Even if there are species right now that we do not know of any productive use for, we say that it is very important that we protect it, that we ensure that it is there, because we used to say that in 10 years time, 20 years time, that the generations coming after us may not recognize some of those species and see the importance, both from either from the protection of the habitat, either as use for a food or use for medication or some kind of other productive use. So it is essential that we do the management now so that the future generations can benefit from the services that biodiversity can give, as well as livelihood opportunities.
Okay. Shanna, I know you were heavily involved in the aqua part of it. You moved from fisheries. So tell us a little more of what your involvement in biodiversity, where you are now.
So marine biodiversity, as we know, is very important. As an island state, most of our claim to land is actually in the oceans. And as an island state, we are also very involved with our oceans. We use the beaches all the time for recreation. It's the reason our tourism industry is doing so well. As long as we have these natural areas, people will continue to come. But in terms of, I think our fishermen probably know best, in terms of biodiversity, Lucians like all sorts of fish, and there are those you meet who like tuna, and those you meet who like balawu and jacks, and then there are those who like their potfish or redfish. That's what everybody enjoys. And so that working with our fishermen especially, we have come to see the need to conserve and preserve certain parts of that marine biodiversity. One of the ways we've done it in 1984, under the Fisheries Act, 24 marine reserves were declared.
Wow.
Coral reef areas as well as mangroves, which we also know are very important for marine biodiversity.
Hold that point, because we'll do for our first break. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. Stay tuned.
What is biodiversity?
When you look at biodiversity, it's all around.
I think of biological and I think of diversity.
What is biosafety?
Safety measures for our foods, our products, etc.
Biodiversity is the variety of life. Biosafety, on the other hand, involves the management of products of biotechnology, such as GMOs and LMOs. Biosafety seeks to protect St Lucia's biodiversity. The terms biodiversity and biosafety are not interchangeable. Get familiar with these terms. Observe the biodiversity around you, the changing environment of food production and sustainable growth. Do your part. Visit our websites and stay tuned to this station for more information on the National Biosafety Framework.
Welcome back to the program. Shanna, you're talking about marine life and, of course, its benefits to St. Lucians, as it were. What's the way forward in terms of ensuring that the marine life is sustained?
So right now we have two big projects that we are working on. One with the OECS called the Caribbean Regional Oceanscape Project. Oceans is gaining a lot of international attention right now, and so we are working with the Oceanscape Project, first of all, to map out what we have here in St. Lucia. We're looking at our ocean wealth. We are very wealthy when it comes to those things, and we have lots of resources still to be tapped. We have not touched some of them as yet. And so we are working with the OECS on this project to really see what we have here, map it, and then work towards managing and ensuring that all people benefit from it. Another project that is currently being implemented with the Department of Fisheries under the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, DVRP, is a coral reef enhancement initiative where we're going to look at ways and means of enhancing our current coral reefs to make them better, to make them more resilient towards disasters. Because as we know, coral reefs play a vital role in protecting us and our assets. They protect our beaches from these large waves and erosion, and a lot of them are being battered over time and are now need that little bit of an enhancement. So we're working with the Department of Fisheries to do that, to do a large-scale coral reef enhancement plan for the island, and then to move forward towards doing those actual enhancements.
There's a program from the ridge to reef.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the Ministry of Agriculture.
You are working alongside?
Yes, so the Ministry of Agriculture, Department of Agriculture, along with several other entities, we're working on the Canneries Ridge to Reef project, where we're working with farmers all the way in the hills and mountains to ensure that they preserve our riverbanks, to ensure that we have good stabilization coming all the way down into the community of canneries and past the community of canneries into our reefs, to ensure that the fishermen in the community are benefiting, their reefs are healthy. We're creating an ecotourism product that takes you from a farm all the way into a fishing boat so that you can enjoy it. And there's a lot of coral reef enhancement there as well, because the rivers have come down with all that sediment. It has been affecting our coral reefs, and you know, they've really been being smothered by that, and that's good topsoil that the farmers need. So we want to keep the soil in the hills, on the ridge, and keep the water as clean as possible.
Great. Jannel, what's happening now in terms of, because I'm sure there's a plan that you mentioned.
Right,
okay?
right.
What's happening now as we speak?
Well, right now we are celebrating International Day for Biodiversity. So we are partnering with some of our usual partners, the St. Lucia National Trust, the Forestry and Fisheries Divisions, St. Lucia Solid Waste, OECS, and with some new partners as well, especially in the private sector, like Massey Stores, Sandals Foundation. We also have the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, quite a few environmental-based organizations to raise awareness, to make that connection to people, to remind them of the uses, the impact that a loss of biodiversity up on the mountaintops can affect down on the marine areas, the impact of cutting down forests on water availability, and all of those sorts of things. So to make those connections, we're doing a lot of public education events, a lot of school visits. One of the big ones that we have going on right now is a photo competition. The theme is Me in Biodiversity, and there's still time to take part. You take a picture of biodiversity and send it to us at our Facebook page, which is Sustaining St Lucia 411. And there are some wonderful prizes, again, from some of these private sector partners, including Windjammers, CGM, Cocoa Palm, and quite a few others who realize the value of biodiversity for tourism, for commerce, and for development. And so we close off with this. We had a movie day where we showed all of the locally produced biodiversity movies at the Walcott House. So we close our celebrations on the 5th of June, World Environment Day, announcing the winners of our photo competition, and I'm sure we will have some fantastic pictures, so you can look for us on Facebook and be part of the voting and so on.
Are you seeing results? All of this that you mentioned, I'm sure a lot of these activities have happened in the past.
Right.
Are you seeing any results going forward?
One of the places that we see the most results is with the children, with the younger generation, as far as taking on the message themselves, taking on the actions, and spreading the message to their parents, encouraging their peers, and so on. Some of the tree plantings that we've done, we saw the excitement to plant the trees, and when we go back and visit, the trees are still standing because the children take care of them, and so. So we are seeing some results. There are other areas that we, of course, would like to see more involvement. Sometimes it's not always at the level that you would imagine. We want to be able to communicate with our policymakers so that they also see the values, and so they can translate those values into policies that work for the conservation of our resources. So we have different levels of success, but we continue with the public education and so on. Okay.
Karl, what's happening now with forestry as we speak in terms of this? You mentioned about livelihoods. I know there was this thing with the basket making and stuff like this. How was this going?
To be honest with you, what we have been doing, I must say, I will start off by saying that in 2015, 2016, forestry had a new strategic plan. Now that strategic plan now has basically told us, basically redirected us, if you want to say, into looking at making livelihood one of the livelihood support, one of the key functions of our department. We have been working, you could say, with a few projects, because we still implement a lot of projects. I can point out that right now we're working with the Reach to Reef in Canris. We're also doing the Iron Ola project. We actually have a few DVRP projects going on. We have the IW Echo that is just starting off in the hinterlands of Sufria. We also have
Mango Biodiversity.
Biodiversity. We're actually even doing some work on our wildlife enclosures and so on. We have a policy from a sustainable forest management point of view into promoting the use of our native native species. We have been trying to propagate as many of our rare plant species as possible and have them be part of our restoration process. We also now looking at working with landowners, because we recognize that by and large our forest reserve is more or less secure. Right? So we now have to look at forests globally, look at land management globally. So we have been stepping up our work with landowners to see how can we help you make money from your land while keeping it on tree cover. So we're promoting agroforestry, and we now have been promoting giving out and helping farmers to plant more trees of economic value, right? Both forestry related as well as fruit-bearing trees. So the forestry department has been stepping up its work and saying that we are also doing a lot of research. So as we speak, for example, we're doing research on growing vanilla on trellis systems. So you may have a piece of land that you are not doing active farming. You have some secondary forest growth, how can you make money from that? Oh, you could probably plant some vanilla on trellis, make use of the habitat, and you could probably make some money from that. We're looking at things like how can we grow orchids under forest cover? How can we even grow things like edible mushrooms under forest cover? So these are some of the things that we do when we say that not only from a biodiversity point of view, from a climate change point of view, that this is strategic, right? So forestry is constantly doing stuff, and research is a very key part of what we do, because what we...
Hold that point. I'll stop you there. We are moving fast and furious. We're due for our second break. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.
Bio means life. Biodiversity is the variety of life all around us. All plants, animals, and microbes, and the places where they live. We need to protect biodiversity so that we can continue to enjoy all the resources it provides. Fresh air, clean water, food, clothing, shelter, and recreation. Biosafety ensures that we protect biodiversity against any negative impacts of GMOs while using it safely for national development.
For more information on the Biosafety Project and how you can be involved, call 451-8746 or 722-9252. Log on to lc.biosafetyclearinghouse.net or join the mailing list slubiosafety@govt.lc.
Welcome back to the program. We are talking biodiversity. Jannel, I'm sure, again, for your program, you spoke about what's happening now.
Right.
I'm sure there are a number of projects, I'm sure to come. Okay, where are we heading?
We are continuing implementing the priorities that have been identified in the second NBSAP. That's our National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which was revised in 2008 and identifies specific areas that we need to focus on. Definitely public education, laws and policies. So, for example, the Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits derived from their use is a protocol that we are seeking to ratify. So we're in the process of establishing committees which would give guidelines as far as how research and commercial institutions access our resources, terrestrial as well as marine. What is the procedure that they have to follow, and what is the negotiation process so that we decide how benefits will be shared. If there are any benefits from the research, whether it's information or data or so on, or if there's actual development of a product and there's a product sold, so there's cash and royalties. We are developing the system for negotiating those benefits so the entire country benefits. So that is one of the protocols. We're also looking to forward the invasive alien species bill, because we've recognized that invasive species are very costly, especially to agriculture, where you can have these pathogens. Black Sikatoka is very recent in our minds. So having these strategies for managing invasive species and also recognizing them, prioritizing funding to deal with them. That's also going to be considered in the IAS bill.
Yes, the CITES gets involved in that too.
CITES would be involved definitely with the Nagoya Protocol as far as providing permits and so on. And of course identifying which pests would be detrimental to agriculture and putting plans in place ahead of time so we can address it.
Great. Karl, tell me something about forestry in the way forward. I'm sure tell us some of the success stories.
Well, you see, with forestry, we have, again, I'll go back to the strategic plan, and based on that, we are hoping to step up our activities in terms of the management of key or critical biodiversity, I was going to say wildlife and other species. I know that we are currently doing things like monitoring things like our iguanas. We still have an issue with the invasive iguana down south. We are also looking at some of our rare species of, we continue working with our rare birds like the white-breasted thrasher. I know that work is being done as well on the St Lucia nightjar, which is endemic, which is very rare, but it's a bird, nocturnal bird, as well as things like the Semplus warbler, which has not been seen for a few decades. So there's work from the wildlife point of view, from the forest management point of view, plant point of view. We are doing work currently with the pencil cedar, which is extremely rare. It's only found on Piti Pito. And we're doing work in terms of looking at how can we propagate it efficiently and spread it so we can increase the range. Because right now at the moment, if you have any kind of disaster happening at Piti Pito, we could potentially lose the population. So we're looking at doing some good work on that. We are continuing to do work on trying to find out how can we increase our numbers in things like the Lowy Canal. Some of the other spices on them that we use, how can we develop protocol for the use, for the sustainable use, that we do not over-harvest and so on. The department is also keen on looking at how can we procure capacity building for our staff so that this work can continue.
Right.
You understand? After this generation of officers have left, right? So the department, you could say, is keen on continuing the work that was started two generations ago, if you want to say. And we're hoping that in the future, when you think forestry, you don't only just think about people who you don't only just think of the forest alone, but you think of opportunities, of livelihoods, of species that actually have a direct benefit to you. Because usually when we talk about forestry, we think of sustainable land management, the management of our water resources and so on. But we're saying that, yes, this is very important to us, but we also want to translate that protection of soil and water into tangible benefits to the population.
Okay, well, let's go to marine now as we're running quickly. Tell us something about the marine, what's up, and then of course on the sargassum seaweed.
Yes, so I'll start with the sargassum. I know everybody is aware of what the sargassum is. No matter where you live in St. Lucia right now, you are aware of this seaweed. And just a brief background on that. So this seaweed has always existed in the Atlantic Ocean. However, we used to get it in small amounts. You'd see a little seaweed on the beach, and that would be fine. What happened is recently, and this is where man's impact on biodiversity occurs, recently a new mass of seaweed has formed in the mid-Atlantic off the coast of Brazil. And we believe it's being fed right now by a lot of the agricultural runoff coming out of the Amazon and other large rivers in South America, and it's growing this mass, and that's why it's coming in such large quantities. That being said, sargassum in itself is not bad. When sargassum, it's a floating seaweed, free floating, it never attaches to anything. It provides a vital environment for small and juvenile fish species as well as sea turtles. They live under there for years under that shaded area, and our fishermen would know we always find fish under shaded areas. And so this is where they live, they grow, and they travel with this seaweed. We've also, and now the problem is when that seaweed ends up on shore, it begins to die, it begins to rot, and as any living thing, when it dies, it starts to smell. However, we do have, there's hope in even this. We have a young gentleman, Mr. Dujour, who has taken this as a challenge. He's using the seaweed to create agricultural fertilizers, which have scientifically been shown to grow your plants faster. They are organic. So there is also opportunity. As with all of our biodiversity, there's opportunity. We just have to look for it. So let's not destroy it. While there are issues with it, there's also an opportunity. So we applaud those out there who are innovating despite what is happening and using our biodiversity for that.
Well, we have come to the end, you know. We come on to
it's too short.
It's too short. Only 10 minutes. There's so much to be discussed. Also, I want to thank you, Shanna. Thank you, Karl, and thank Ms. Gabriel for being here. And I wish you all success in your continued endeavor to ensure that our biodiversity is preserved. And we can get some livelihood out of it. So thank you again for being here.
Thanks.
You've been watching Agriculture on the Move. Thank you for viewing the program. And remember, agriculture is our business, and eat fresh. St. Lucia's best. I'm Philip Sidney. Goodbye. Thank you.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole en mouvement.